My guest today is Anna-Kaisa Heikkinen, the Director General of the Department for Africa, the Middle East and Latin America. With a career spanning over 2 decades in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland, Anna has served as ambassador to Mozambique, Eswatini and Madagascar, as well as head of mission in Ramallah. She has also worked as a special advisor to the Prime Minister on international affairs and held important roles in Finland's foreign service, including postings in Russia and India. Anna speaks 9 languages, including her own native language, Finnish, and has even authored a Hindi textbook for Finnish students. I'm so excited to explore her wealth of experience and insights and share it with all of you. Hi, Anna. A very warm welcome to Atlanta Diaries.
Hi, Emma. It's really a privilege to be on board. Thank you so much for the invitation and your kind words.
Awesome. So, Anna, we spoke last time about the Nordic culture you're coming from, and there's a lot of uniqueness and something very special about it. You know, the egalitarian culture, the equity, and so on. So, share with us, how did your early childhood experiences shape the person you've become today? And how did they influence your worldview?
Oh, thanks, Emma. You know, as you just said, I come from a Nordic country, Finland, and which is known to be an equal country in many ways, be it then gender equality or in other terms. And I think that really is one of the things that has shaped my early childhood and the way I look at the world. Equality also in terms of opportunity. From early on in life as a child, I knew that I could be anything if I worked hard for it. I mean, the kind of society I come from gives us the tools to do it with a very good education system. So I think, that is a clear starting point for everything I've done. And I think another thing is that, I come from a family that was really a news freak family. So I grew up, in a family where the radio was on the first thing in the morning and it went off the last thing in the evening. Several newspapers came into the house in the morning and the TV news were like a sacred moment in the evening when we would all get together and watch them together. So I think I grew up with this huge curiosity for the world, although my hometown is actually located at the Arctic Circle in northern Finland, far away actually from the big world. But I think this family culture also helped to shape my future path. And also the fact that my hometown not only was located or is located in the north, but also at the eastern border, which was then the border to the Soviet Union. Now it's the border to Russia. And in my childhood, obviously, it was a closed border because of the Cold War and the way the world was. So I lived about 40 kilometers from the border, but east was not really a direction. One could not go there. In a way, the east just didn't exist. And I think that further nurtured that for the world in my mind. I wanted to find out what was out there in different directions.
Goes back to that curiosity again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Wow. That is so fascinating at one level and romantic at another, Anna. Like Lapland is one place where my family always wanted to go. So tell us, some memory of, and it was Lapland, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's in the very southern parts of Lapland. And well, I think also another thing about growing up there is that one lives very close to the nature and the outdoors, in spite of the good infrastructure, good education, and like normal, urban life in that sense. But the nature is everywhere. And I think that also has really been a part of my life ever since then. For me, being outdoors and being in the nature is extremely important. It's like meditation, walking in the forest, going for a run in the woods. But also, as I said, the fact that although a small town further away, we still had a good education system, many inspirational teachers, and really ways and tools to start unraveling the mystery that is called the world.
So amazing and fascinating. From here, I want to sort of unpack what career choices you took, because you mentioned last time that a lot of them were led by intuition and the heart.
I think actually most big decisions in my life have been led by intuition. And I generally think that it is very important to follow one's heart in life. I mean, in spite of being quite cerebral about certain things and be the person you are, in order to also be the person you can be if you open your wings and start flying. For instance, when I chose the subject I wanted to study at the university for my master's, well, at that time we still didn't have the internet, so I had to browse through books, the offerings of the universities.
Right.
And I still remember the moment when I browsed through the book of the university I then went to. It was a green book. I still remember the size and the shape. And then there was this page on the right-hand side of the book that had the headline International Relations. And when I saw those two words, I knew that was it. I mean, I didn't immediately in my heart, I knew that this would what I would want to do. Although I then browsed through the book, I browsed through the books of other universities, but then I came back to that page and I thought, this is exactly what I want to study when I apply for a university. As I said, follow your heart.
So I've had Atlantas from the corporate world, from the creative world, from the sports world, but a world of diplomacy is unique and super fascinating. So how do you feel about sharing a little bit about the early years of your journey in diplomacy?
After I had finished my studies at the university, I got my master's in international relations. I actually then heard from some friends who had been like interns at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that actually it is like very traditional, if not old-fashioned, hierarchical, maybe even patriarchal place that didn't sound like a very, how would I put it, inviting workplace. And I thought, although this subject matter interests me a lot, but perhaps this doesn't sound like an organization that I want to work in. So actually then I went into communications for several years. But then at some point I realized that I think I have to apply once into the Foreign Service because we have a kind of a competitive concours to get into the Foreign Service. So I thought I have to apply once in order to be able to, in my old age, to have peace of mind with myself. And I did apply once and I got in. And I haven't looked back ever since. Of course, organizations are different. And it was also more than 20 years ago, still quite a traditional organization, but it has evolved a lot since then. And I think all of us newcomers in the organization have always reshaped it a bit. And as you said, it is a very unique profession because it's also a lifestyle. One kind of embarks on a journey, lifelong journey of moving, also picking up new jobs every few years within the same organization, working in a different embassy, working in a different department. So it's actually constant rotation within one greater organization, which also makes it very interesting and challenging because in a way you don't need to change your job or your career, and yet you get to do new things all the time.
Right, absolutely. So you came from an equal culture, lots of opportunities, you could do what you want. When did you first notice or experience biases or inequalities in the real world? If you did, that is.
Yeah, I think it happened when I finally entered the working life after the university, because until then, I think everything had been extremely smooth and equal around me. I did well at school and in my studies. And so it was basically everything just depended on me. But then entering the working life and a very different community, I mean, it was people of different backgrounds and certainly generations that I was then working with. And that was when for the first time, I realized that, wow, in the eyes of some people, I am a young woman who perhaps doesn't have a lot of experience and knowledge yet. And it was a very, very kind of surprising feeling. I still remember actually the first time it happened. I do remember that meeting when an older gentleman treated me like a young woman who would be like an assistant secretary or who would not have any, cognitive intellectual capacities to perform the duties that I was responsible for. And this was still in the communications world that I was working in. Mm-hmm. I remember how striking it felt. And then afterwards, I've thought many times that had I been a young man of my age, doing the kind of job I was in, perhaps I would have been seen as a promising, talented young tiger who would be, ready to grow professionally and go anywhere. Luckily, I didn't have a lot of them, because I think usually as soon as they let me speak and they noticed that I actually knew what I was doing, the situation changed. But I do remember those early experiences that really shook me that this world, even in Finland, was not ready.
And do you also remember how did you react, or how did you deal with it?
I think in the first few occasions, I think I was just so taken aback that I couldn't really even react, because I didn't know how to react to somebody who doesn't know that I actually have a brain.
You've never experienced something like this. You're only quality, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So what changed things?
I think I always just thought that I let my work speak for itself. And luckily that does take a long way. I mean, I think that is usually the best way to go about it. I think it was important to ignore those who didn't know better, and then just to move on.
And I'm wondering about any mentors in your journey, any people, your safe space, your go-to people.
Actually, in that same first communications job, then a bit later on, I had a boss who really became a mentor as well. And I learned so much from her. And even today, we are still in touch. When I meet her, I always tell her how important it was for me to work with her early on in my career. From her, I think I learned to think bigger instead of just thinking of the thing that I was doing right then, but always to connect it to a larger context. I learned to really let my verbal skills fly. Again, this was in the communications. And also because she came from a marketing background, she also taught me to think visual. And although I'm in diplomacy, I'm in government service, but I do think that those lessons have been very helpful in different ways, even in this career. Of course, I think a good boss has many qualities, or a good leader, but I think for me, the most important thing is that I can always learn something new. And I think also from each boss or leader, one learns also the things that one does not want to repeat. Absolutely. When one then in the future is in a leadership position. So those lessons, I think I also took with me from those early years.
Awesome. My God, so many questions came to my mind when you shared this experience, Anna. First, of course, is when you spoke about your verbal skills. We can't not talk about those 8 languages, and it's no mean feat. It's incredible, and I know there's a science behind it. So, share with us what inspired this passion for learning languages. How do you feel this skill of yours has helped you in your leadership journey?
I think for us who grow up in a country like Finland, which is a fairly small country, at least we have a fairly small population, and a very unique and difficult language, Finnish. For us, it's always clear that we have to learn foreign languages in order to be able to communicate with the rest of the world. So we do have to learn other languages. So, I mean, that goes without saying that we start learning languages at school, and many of us learn several. Of course, one has to have a passion for it and a certain talent for it as well, because learning languages is not easy. It's hard work. Sometimes people come to me and they say, like, oh, you know so many languages and it's amazing. And they think that they just fall from the sky.
Yeah.
But no, it's actually been a lot of hard work with each and every one of those languages. So it's dedication, it is repetition, it's commitment, it is patience. It is also mercy vis-a-vis one's own self, to the shortcomings of one's, learning abilities, like momentarily. It's like, if you want to learn to play an instrument, you can't just, grab the instrument and start playing it. Or if you want to learn a new sport, you can't just, take the racket and the ball and start hitting it like a champion. So that's definitely the most important thing in learning languages. But for me, it is really connected to my curiosity for the world, because I do think that languages are really, they are the mirrors of cultures. They are certainly the mirrors of our souls. And they are just extremely aesthetic. I love the sound of different language. It's like music as well.
Beautiful. I just wish I had the talent and the skill to do it. Maybe I should put it on my wish list, or at least give it a shot. Anna, a topic which is so close to my heart and an obvious extension of yours is culture. Having lived in so many countries, what cultural differences have made the biggest impact on your leadership style, or even stories on cultural shocks or cultural insights? How did you build that cultural humility?
Now, that's a very big question. Maybe I start from the leadership end first, and then we can talk about the more like philosophical questions. So I think in leadership, I would maybe pick up two things here.
Yeah.
The Finnish leadership style tends to be quite straightforward. I wouldn't call it blunt or like, it's not like impolite, but it's very straightforward. We communicate quite clearly what it is that we expect and what is it that we think. Then again, I have worked, for instance, in Asian and African cultures where there's a certain softness and people avoid saying exactly what they think. Certainly, oftentimes avoid saying no, or avoid saying, I don't understand, or I don't know. So there's a certain lack of clarity. So that has really taught me to listen and interpret the words that I hear in a different way. It's been almost like learning yet another language. Like I hear the words people say, but I actually have to then go beyond the words and understand what it is that they actually want to say. So it's like, almost like a code language or a nonverbal language that I have to like uncipher. And this has certainly taught me a lot of patience as well. Another thing about the Finnish leadership style is that we are very low hierarchy. We are very, very equal once again. But in certain other cultures, you cannot entirely do away with it. No matter how hard you would want to say that we are all equal, and I don't want to have titles, and we should be able to talk to each other like two human beings. It is, of course, impossible to change a culture. And of course, I have to respect that. I have to understand that I cannot just go and tell them to completely change the behavior of the whole culture. But this has certainly also made me more conscious of my leadership values. So it's been a great learning experience. Then I think you had so many angles to the same question. And, about understanding cultures or navigating different cultures. And for me, what is always the key, I think, and what is the most important thing in understanding a new culture or overcoming even difficulties in new cultural situations is listening.
Yeah.
And not only listening, but you also try and understand what the other person is saying. Because too often, yes, we listen, but we are too busy maybe formulating our own reply.
Yes.
Or we are too busy processing our own opinion that we don't really start unpacking the words that we've just heard. And I think that's one of the keys to overcoming, cultural difficulties or differences, or simply learning to navigate new operating environments that I've had so many so far already in my life. And I think it goes hand in hand with respect. Even if you had fairly fundamental differences of opinion on some fundamental issues of international politics or, say, human rights or whatever, you still have to maintain a certain respect vis-a-vis the person you are talking to. Your opinions may differ, but you're still communicating with another human being. So I think that respect is extremely important, because that too shows that you're also interested in the situation and you are interested in understanding the opinion of the other.
I love the new perspective on language. You really articulated it well. Any anecdotes of any kind?
Well, yeah, I think I would have so many of them from all around the world. But of course, as a diplomat, I'm also a bit careful in highlighting certain
Of course.
countries here or certain situations. But perhaps, I mean, kind of a general anecdote about many situations is because inevitably, no matter how hard you try and understand a culture, how well you're prepared to situations, sometimes mistakes happen.
Of course.
And I've just realized that oftentimes what just helps is just simply being extremely human in that situation and admitting that now this didn't go quite right. I think be it then in a professional situation or be it then at a counter of a supermarket or the cashier, it's like you flash a big smile. You admit that something went wrong. And perhaps sometimes it helps to change the topic, to try and move on as quickly as possible from the actual situation with a nice little joke or other light remark.
Right. So, my husband and I have had the good fortune of living in Myanmar, in Burma. And I was just newly married and it was the Chinese New Year and we went for this big feast. And I was curious. I wanted to know each and everything I was consuming. And you can imagine from frog legs to ox tongue to everything possible. And I'm going on asking my husband, what are we eating? And he's like, just keep quiet and eat. Just don't say anything. I'm like, no, I'm not putting everything in my mouth. And now when I think about it, it was about saving face, right? And really in my ignorance, probably I might have even, upset at somebody, though I think they were all very gracious. But I'm just suddenly remembering this anecdote, which goes back now maybe 25 years. It was a huge lesson on cultural sensitivity and humility.
Yeah, I think that with all the countries I've lived in, I think there would be so many stories to tell, I think. But perhaps I won't mention any single one of them right now.
Right. Absolutely appreciate where you're coming from. Let's talk about your leadership style. Love for you to share some of your joys or challenges you experienced as a leader and your learnings thereafter.
The best thing about being a leader is the sense of community and the feedback also you get from colleagues. The possibility and the chance to enable others' good work. I think that is one of the keys. I think being a leader or a boss is not a position, it is a responsibility.
Yeah.
And seeing that it happens is extremely rewarding. And then getting that feedback from colleagues as well, that they think I'm enabling their work. Certainly learning is always extremely important. I said earlier that I always wanted to learn from my own bosses, but I think I also learned from my other colleagues, obviously, all the time. So it has to go both ways. And I do like planning and taking forward and completing processes. So when we see that something has gone the way we wanted or the hard work paid off, that is also extremely rewarding. Of course, challenges always come from the fact that everywhere in the world we deal with human communities. Certainly, if one has to take difficult decisions, regarding personnel, that those moments are certainly, they are demanding. And especially when I was still younger, and because I like doing things quite, if not fast, but without delay, I was still perhaps a bit more impatient with time. But, certainly age has helped. I'm more patient with the speed of processes. And of course, sometimes in the working life, one may encounter people who don't share the same passion for what we are doing. So perhaps those can also be difficult moments, just because I myself usually feel strongly about what I'm doing.
Yes. So love to unpack this, right? So, when you come across people who don't have the same mindset, don't have the same urge to learn. So how do you then deal with that situation?
I think then we just have to look at really what unites us in spite of this, because we always in an organization, we do have some common targets or values or ways of working that we all agree upon. And again, it's very important, again, to listen and to try and understand why this person doesn't feel so well in that working community, because usually there are very good reasons behind it. And so through that, perhaps we find ways how to make the work more interesting for this other person,
Right.
and thereby move on. I think the worst thing you can do is to just stop and try and tolerate the situation. I think it is important to try and do something about it. Of course, you cannot change a person. I mean, even I wouldn't change. I mean, like that. I mean, if somebody tried to like convince that now you have to think differently completely. No, of course, it doesn't work that way. But usually there is always something that we can do about it. And of course, one thing is also clear that we all come to the office from a background. And sometimes people have something else on their minds when they come to work, something else in their lives that weighs heavy. And that too may impact how they feel. And that too has to be understood.
Absolutely. Anna, shifting gears, given that your diplomatic career comes with so much of travel, what's your perspective on friendships and social networks? A necessary part of a human journey, right?
I would say that moving from one place to another, making friends and then leaving again, it is demanding. But at the same time, I think thanks to this career, I have made so many amazing friends in different parts of the world. And I've met a lot of like-minded people, obviously, through this job as well. A lot of people who lead similar lives as well and understand what it means to root oneself somewhere and then uproot oneself again after a few years. And I think when you move to a new country and you don't know anybody, you have to start from the beginning.
Absolutely.
I think you also learn to cherish those friendships even more. I mean, I shouldn't judge, but sometimes I think that if you stay put somewhere all of your life, then maybe you start taking people for granted as well.
Sure.
But when you do have to work for those friendships, build them, maintain them, I think it makes them even stronger, actually. Although we then part and we don't see each other for many years, perhaps. And of course, not all friendships are equally strong. And of course, as always in life, a human relationship, it goes both ways. It takes two. It's both sides then have to want to keep in touch and all that. But networks, of course, are extremely important. And I really feel that I have a huge extended family around the world. And I'm so grateful for it. Be it then the friends back in India, be it then friends back in Mozambique or other places. So it is really a gift.
Beautiful, yeah. Talk to us about how do you bring that balance in your life, work and non-work life?
Work is important and I work a lot, but work is not the most important thing in life. I think that in itself helps to bring the balance. And also, I do think that if I don't defend my own time and my own private life and space, then nobody else does it for me. So I can't just say that, oh, work takes all of my time. I have to be able to put the limits myself and say that I want to have my time for my sports. I do want to have my time for going to concerts or theater or whatever, and meeting friends, of course. Somebody has said, and I do think this is an extremely wise thing, that what stresses us out is not so much the amount of work we do or with the amount of work we have on our desk, but the fact that we keep compromising on the things that we really love. So if I constantly compromise on my sports and I'm like, oh, I didn't have time to go running because I have so much work to do, or I skipped the concert that I had tickets for because I have so much work to do, that is really, I think, the stress factor. So I think it's extremely important to make sure that I do the things in life that really matter to me. And then I can also work a lot on top of that.
I love that. And therefore, what are those things that you love to do?
Well, for me, I think being physically fit or in a good condition it's not only, helpful for work and all that, but it's just extremely fundamentally important for me. and just also pushing my limits there as well. I run marathons, and at the same time, it is still counterbalanced to work and the cerebral things I do. And sport is for me also very meditative. I do enjoy the peace of mind that comes with it. For me, learning languages is also relaxing. For other people, it might sound like a lot of work, but for me, it is very relaxing. It's a very different way for my brain to work, to connect things. And certainly everything that has to do with culture, be it then concerts or theatre or reading, is also extremely important.
So I was very intrigued when I read about the fact that you've written a book in Hindi. What inspired that decision?
So I was posted to India already 20 years ago, actually, from 2004 to 2008. And there I had, for the first time in my life, the opportunity to learn a language with a private teacher.
Mm.
I had 5 foreign languages before that, but I had learned all of them in groups where the learning was led by the teacher and the course plan. And there was a certain group dynamic, and also the pace of learning came from the group dynamics and the course program. And fair enough, that too can be extremely efficient and interesting and inspiring. But then when I moved to India for the first time in my life, I actually had the chance to start a completely different language as well, a non-European language, and also a new script. And I thought it was such an amazing opportunity to really dive straight into the deep end with a private teacher. And I just enjoyed it so much. I just really, really, really started digging deep into the language. And also I was so fortunate. I had 2 different teachers, and the second one that I then really started doing the more advanced phase of the studies, it really became kind of a guru-shishya relationship, a teacher-student, a teacher-pupil relationship where I think we both learned a lot from each other. I think that's what he told me, at least, as well. It was extremely inspiring both ways to spar each other. And of course, he was teaching me, but at the same time, I was also a demanding student. So we went very far together. It was a great, great experience to learn the language with him. And then at some stage, I had a Finnish visitor, a friend visiting me in Delhi, who had also tried to learn Hindi before with the learning materials that were available in English. And she happened to overhear a lesson of mine because the teacher came home, and she's like, why don't you do something about that language? I mean, how many Finns speak Hindi like that? And why don't you, for instance, write a book? And that thought started then brewing in my mind. And I think the idea was so crazy that I kind of decided to give it a go. I wrote to a publisher with a plan for Finnish-speaking students to learn Hindi. And they picked it up right away. I'm like, oops. So now actually, I think I have to do it. So then I wrote it. And I absolutely loved telling the story of Hindi to Finnish-speaking students through Finnish grammar as well. Because until then, we Finns who have been studying Hindi, we had to go through the English grammar, which in a way made no sense. So now I could create those shortcuts and tell the story to Finnish-speaking students. And I really, really enjoyed the journey.
That is really fascinating, Anna. And did the teacher help you? Your guru ne help kari to do it?
Hanji, of course, he helped me.
I love it.
Yes, yeah, he was there sparring me again. I mean, there were of course certain points where I needed clarification. I needed, of course, also help with certain expressions and all that. But of course, he was a great support. So I'm eternally thankful to Sayamji for his support.
So what's next for Anna? Do you see yourself ever retiring or?
Well, I'm luckily still quite far away from the official retirement age in Finland. What's next? I think, of course, I have a certain job now, and I've just moved back to Finland after 7 years abroad. So I'm still settling down back in Finland, back in Helsinki.
Back home.
Yes, back home. But I think what is next? I just hope that it will be constant learning, and that will definitely keep me going.
Awesome. And before we end the conversation, I just want to end with this last question. So, looking back, what's the most meaningful lesson your journey has taught you about leadership skills or as a person?
I think having lived such a big part of my life in different parts of the world and in very different cultures, and now, of course, also observing a world which is increasingly problematic. Unfortunately, we see huge challenges facing us, starting from climate change. So, I mean, there's a lot of difficult things that one has to deal with in this world at the moment. But what really gives me hope is that I've seen in all around the world the goodness in people. Most people are inherently incredibly good, and they want the best for themselves and this world. And the other thing is that while we see so many, again, unpleasant things, even ugly things in this world, I've really started to cherish all the beauty in the world even more, be it then human beings or be it then the beauty of nature, of the beauty of our cultures, of our interactions. I think having seen so many challenging things, I've become even more thankful for everything good that we have. And I do believe that this world still has a brighter future ahead.
This is such a beautiful note to, I think, bring an end to the conversation. And thank you for sharing all your wonderful insights.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, do hang on for just one more minute. I have a request for you. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Atlanta Diaries on Spotify, iTunes, or whichever platform you follow. Do join us in our mission to empower and inspire by sharing the podcast with a friend or colleague. It will be great if you can share on the social media platforms you follow, be it LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or any other. Please leave a review or rating on iTunes or Spotify. It really helps us reach a wider audience. Lastly, I wanted to share with you that many of my coaching clients and listeners have created a cheat sheet with their key takeaways from the episodes. I invite you to consider jotting down 1 or 2 key takeaways as you navigate your amazing journey. Have a wonderful rest of the day and see you next week for another inspiring journey on Atlanta Diaries.